I mention that I cover by occasionally? I am Ben, welcome to Corner. Today we're taking a look at a new release. This is Absinthe Underground by Jamie Pacton. This released on February the 6th, and this is a Sapphic romantic novel. As always, we talk about the story, the characters, the world building, as well as the presentation. I give my final thoughts at the end. Let's just jump straight into this. So this is very much Fae inspired first of all, and it is primarily at least a heist story with romance elements involved. Obviously the romance is between the two main characters of Esme and Sybil, who have a friends to lovers thing going on with them. And the basis of the story is that they are a struggling couple of people living in a city not too dissimilar to late 19th century Paris, and they're struggling to make ends. And very much it's a case of Esme does missions fixing things like clocks, watches, and other mechanical devices, whereas Sybil is a little bit more illicit in her activities. More specifically, stalks the streets at night and steals posters that are there to advertise locations or artwork or whatever they may be, which I never knew was actually a thing before I read this book. And they come across the poster which is covered on the front of the book for the Absinthe Underground, which is a premium night in the city. Little do they know when they manage to cut it down is that there's announcements on it. When they go to sell it, the lady on the poster, Maeve, walks in. And this is where we have the revelation they exist. They are real. Maeve herself is known as the Green Fairy. So not especially subtle. And at this point, we get the revelation that all Maeve wants to go home to the Fae, but she can't. What she needs is someone to go into the Fae and steal some items for her, fetch them back so that she can then go home. And as this story progresses, we get a load of extra backstory to do with Sybil, and it becomes clear that Esme did not know as much about her as she thought. But this doesn't matter. Throughout the course of the story, they need to get closer and eventually act on the attraction that has been building between them before the book actually started. Once the book setup is done, this does perform quite a quick clip as they go through a number of mini heists to prepare themselves, go to the Fae, and then you have the heist in the Fae itself and them trying to deal with this very otherworldly place. And overall, it is a good, fast-paced story that does keep your attention. There are a number of characters in here, and the main two are obviously Esme and Sybil, and they are polar opposite. Esme is as close to law-abiding as you can be in many regards, very orderly to an almost OCD-like level. Everything has its place, and everything needs to be put in its place, whereas you have this whirlwind of chaos that is Sybil. And you begin to get reasons for Sybil in particular why she is like she is, and also why Esme is like she is. Well, as you do get kind of flashbacks and insights into how they both are and why Esme took in the first place. Also, we begin to find out why Sybil was not at home with her family, and actually her family isn't all it appears to be. And because of how different they are, they actually work really, really well together. It's very much an opposite kind of situation. There are a couple of other characters in here. The main two I'm going to mention, the first one is Lucian, who is Sybil's brother and has previously been employed by Maeve for the Absinthe Underground to perform the same thing that Maeve has employed Esme and Sybil to do. Well, that is not known at the time. And obviously you have Maeve herself, who is a full-on Fae. And you don't get a sense of really trusting anything she says. And again, due to being Fae, kind of affects that in many regards. But you get this sense of almost decadence, almost drips from her as she sort of lets the glamour fall so they can see what she truly is briefly. And she talks about how people are quite willing to trick themselves anyway, and the glamour isn't really necessary. And she's created this amazing nightclub where people come, and the Absinthe acts as almost like a muse, much like it did for many creative people through history, where it created both inspiration and ruin due to the nature of the drink. And it is very much the place to be, and she is the queen of this club. But again, she is Fae, and she has other things going on which are not immediately apparent. And actually, the reveal at the back end of the book for Maeve is well done. I will say that because of how brief this book is, it comes in at just over 300 pages. Some of the characters don't have as much time to breathe as I would ideally have liked. But that being said, you do get a full sense of relationships between them all. You do get a full sense of personality, and even the smaller characters that also drift through the story and form important story beats throughout do a good job. And the way that the backstory for Esme and Sybil is told specifically is very well done in very natural sets of flashbacks within chapters that are relevant to what's going on. So I really appreciated the character work. So to talk about world building, I do need to briefly touch on something which I didn't realise when I picked up the book. Whilst I do not believe that this is a sequel per se, I think it is set in the same world as another book by Pacton called The Vermilion Emporium. So I get the sense that there's already some pre-established world building that happened in that book. But this is very much inspired by late 19th century Paris in particular, something the author does talk about back of the book in the author notes. And the whole stuff around the poster thieves and how lucrative it could potentially be for the right posters, right buyer, is really, really interesting, as well as the general sort of difficulties of people growing up and trying to survive in one of the big hub cities in Europe at that time period in the late 19th century. And also the way the Fae works is well done. Well, you don't get a huge amount of time within the Fae realm, but you do have some touches of the fact that some people do realise that the Fae have coexisted with gateways between them for centuries, and there's people on both sides that really do not want those gates to be open, and only specific people can do so. And you do get a sense of true power as well, and mysteriousness, viciousness from Fae that you meet here. They are not good or evil as we would normally associate as a person would be, because they have such a long lifespan. Mortal lives are like an ant, because they are so much more, and that is really well. The other thing that's really interesting is the approach to Absinthe itself. As already mentioned, Absinthe has been the cause of inspiration and ruin for many, many artists or musicians or creative people throughout throughout the years. And the way that it's made in this book is really interesting, as the way that Maeve creates it is by taking gemstones from the Fae, crushing it down and mixing it to make this magical drink that delivers the inspiration, which I thought was a really, really nice touch, and sort of added to the exclusivity of it. Well, again, much like the character work, the biggest thing that works against the world here is the length of the book. And whilst you'd get a sense of the world, you get a good sense of tension throughout and danger from the Fae as well. I will say that sometimes things ended up wrapped up a little bit too easily, largely because of how brief the book is. But overall, the world building was strong enough to help keep. First things first, the cover, I'm going to butcher the name and I apologies. This was designed by Andy Lugto, and the cover is why I bought this book. I mean, this is just useful. Also, it is published by Peachtree, who published Hell Followed With Us. I'll link that at the top. One of my favourite books of last year. And they do publish a lot of very exciting children's and young adult literature, and are well worth checking out, especially if you're in North America where they're based. Now, in terms of the pacing, it's a little bit uneven in some ways due to the fact it takes a little bit of time to get all the cards in order, but once everything is set up, then it does not let up, and that works by the nature of this being a heist story. There are brief moments of downtime, and this gives you a bit of insight into the characters, which does help. In terms of pure descriptive work, there isn't actually that much here. There's enough to give you a sense of your surroundings and a feel of the atmosphere of where you are in the world, but it doesn't go into deep detail explaining everything you can see. It's more about the atmosphere of the time. And part of that is, again, due to the brevity of the book. And my biggest issue with this book is the fact that I wish it was longer. I think you could get another 150 pages in here, and it would actually make the book even better than it already is. But it is a very solid, quick read. I read this in one sitting hours. The other thing that I want to mention to do with the presentation. So this is a dual point of view. So you do vary from Sybil to Esme, as well as you often do in romance titles, which does give you an interesting perspective of what's going on, especially with two very, very different people. And also, with this being a Peachtree book, you do have some interesting bits and pieces additionally in there. So something you don't see very often, you quite often see authors do their about the author and their dedications. You don't always get information about some of the stuff that they've done to research this, and there is author's notes in here that cover this better than I've seen in a lot of other books. Talking about posters, thieves, and poster dealers, Absinthe itself, the nightclubs, and the Queen culture in 18 Paris, which really does give the sense that there's a great deal of research that's gone into this, which I really do appreciate it. Now, again with Peachtree, I don't think it's available yet, but I know for a lot of their titles, they do almost like a reading discussion guide. I know there is for the Vermilion Emporium, was for Hell Followed With as well, so I fully expect that to be a thing as well for this at a later date, which I believe you will probably be able to download from the site as well, if that's something to look at. So there's a lot of positives here for presentation. Again, the only issue I have is that the book is not. Overall, I actually quite enjoyed this. I do wish it was a more detailed book, but that would have led to the book being longer and may have damaged the pacing, so you do have a bit of trade-off there. I have seen this described as Holly Black meets Moulin Rouge, and I'm not quite sure I agree with that, just because the Coke of Air series is so politically detailed compared to this that I don't think they're comparable in that regard, although they do have some interesting similarities in ways. But that being said, this is a quick read that's well paced, that has some interesting world building, lovable characters. I gave this a 3.75 stars out of 5. I highly recommend checking this out, especially if you're going through a phase of wanting to read some Bay romance as well. I think you'll find something to like here. But that's my thoughts on the Absinthe. Hope you've enjoyed. I'll catch you all soon.